My wife's ultimate betrayal. How her cheating unraveled our marriage and left me facing the truth. Hey, my name's Ryan. I'm 32 and I got married to the love of my life, Ashley, 5 years ago at a beautiful house in the suburbs of Illinois. We were both successful in our careers and had a pretty solid relationship, but then something started changing. I started feeling different and I couldn't figure out why. I always thought I loved Ashley, but over the last year I realized that I wasn't straight. It was a hard breakup for us, and it showed me that our relationship wasn't as strong as I thought it was. It's been tough since then, but I've come to terms with who I am, and I'm working on building a new life for myself. It's hard sometimes, but it also gives me a chance to grow and find out more about myself. I try to push my feelings down and ignore them, but I really loved Ashley. She was my bestie and my everything. We'd built a life together, but over time, the distance grew between us. Our physical stuff got less and less, and when we did do it, it felt awkward and forced. It wasn't fair to her or me. Guilt weighed heavy on me, but I just couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that the person she thought I was no longer existed. Ashley saw the change in me. She noticed and started asking questions. Every time she did, I got more distant and stayed out later, pretending to be working. But really, I was just driving around aimlessly, trying to figure things out and cope with this secret that was tearing me up inside. Then, all of a sudden, everything went south. Ashley got suspicious. One night, when I got home late again, she was there waiting for me. I could see the anger and pain in her eyes, but something else was there too, determination. "Ryan," she said in a cold voice, "we need to talk." I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready for it. She took me to the couch and, after a tense silence, showed me her phone. It was a message thread from a guy I'd been chatting with online. We'd never met in person, but the text said it all. She asked what it was all about, and her voice was shaking with rage. It felt like the world was spinning out of control. The walls were closing in on me, and my secret wasn't safe anymore. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was trapped. There was no going back. I don't really know how to say this, I stammered, barely able to get the words out. But Ashley wasn't letting it go. "Say what?" she demanded, getting up and slamming the phone down on the coffee table. "Ryan, are you cheating on me with another guy?" I couldn't deny it anymore. The truth needed to come out, even if it hurt like hell. "Ashley, I think I might be gay." Her face twisted in shock, then anger. She started pacing, running her hands through her hair. Her disbelief and rage were palpable. "I didn't want this to happen." I tried to explain. "I love you, I really do. It's just that I've had these feelings for a while now." Tears welled up in Ashley's eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I wanted to comfort her, but I knew I wasn't the one to do it at that moment. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door. I was left there, realizing my revelation had totally messed up our life. But I didn't know at the time that it was just the start. Her betrayal was going to lead to things I never thought she'd do. The days after my big confession were kind of cold and distant, you know? Ashley was avoiding me, and when we talked, it was short and angry. We were still under the same roof, but it felt like we were living in different worlds. I totally understand why she was mad at me. I broke her trust, and I betrayed her, man. Every time I looked at her, I could see the hurt in her eyes. I wanted to talk about it, but deep down I knew it wasn't going to be easy. A few weeks went by, and then one evening Ashley finally broke the silence. She wasn't mad, which was surprising. "Ryan," she said calmly, "I think we should move on and figure out what to do next." I was shocked. After everything, I didn't think she'd say that. "What do you mean, move on?" I asked. "I think it's time for us to go our separate ways," she said, with a sharp tone but a hint of relief in her voice. "You have some issues you need to work through, and I want to be with someone who truly loves me." I understood where she was coming from, but it still stung. "I didn't mean to hurt you," I said softly. "I just didn't know what else to do." She sighed and looked me in the eyes, her anger fading but still there. "We both deserve better," she said, "but it won't be easy." For a moment, I thought we could part amicably, but then Ashley started acting weird. She was losing important documents and misplacing my things. At first I thought it was just me being forgetful, but then it got worse. One night, I got home from work and found Ashley sitting at our dining table. There was her laptop, open in front of her. As soon as I walked in, she quickly closed it. Her eyes were darting around nervously, like she was caught doing something wrong. I felt my heart sink. The air was filled with awkward tension, and something told me there was something wrong. "What's up, Ashley?" I said, trying to stay calm. "Nothing," she said too quickly, getting up and heading to the kitchen. I followed her and said, "Ashley, we can talk. If there's anything bothering you, let's talk about it." She turned to me with anger in her eyes and said, "You can't act like the victim here, Ryan. You messed everything up." Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. I said, "I'm not acting like the victim, but I want to know what's going on. You've been so distant and secretive lately." Ashley let out a bittersweet laugh and said, "Secretive after all I've done for you?" I tried to stay calm. "Listen, I know I hurt you, and there's nothing I can do about that, but we need to talk about what's going on. It's not good for either of us," I said. Her eyes got dark, and for a second, I thought she was going to finally break down and tell me what's really bothering her. But instead, she just brushed me off and headed upstairs, leaving me with a sinking feeling in my gut. The next week, things got worse. I noticed some of my accounts had been messed with. At first I thought it was a mistake, but when I called the bank, it was clear someone was draining my money. I confronted Ashley, but she denied it. Something about her denial, and the smug look on her face, made me even more suspicious. I started to get paranoid, checking my accounts all the time, wondering what she was up to. Then one night, things started to make sense. I was trying to sleep in my bed when I heard some whispers in the other room on the phone. I was so curious, so I quietly got out of bed and snuck to the door, looking through the crack. "No, it's perfect," she said in a low voice. "He has no idea. He's so caught up in his guilt. He hasn't even noticed what I've been up to." My heart dropped. She was talking about me. After a long pause, she kept going, "Yeah, we're meeting next week like planned. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late." I backed away from the door, my mind racing. What was she planning? Who was she talking to? Fear flooded through me. Whatever Ashley was up to, it couldn't be good. But before I could figure out what to do next, she hung up and the door creaked open. I quickly ran into the bedroom and pretended to be asleep as she walked in. I could feel her standing there looking at me, and for the first time, I was scared of her. I knew whatever Ashley was planning was going to happen soon, and I had to figure it out before it was too late. The next few days were tense. I was so cautious around Ashley, it felt like I was walking on eggshells. Every time I talked to her, I was trying to figure out her next move. I just couldn't forget that phone call. Her cold, calculating voice was so different from the Ashley I'd known for 5 years. It was like she'd become a stranger, someone I couldn't trust anymore. So I started being more careful with everything. My finances, my personal belongings, even my email and phone. Because I had to protect myself. The woman I loved seemed to want to hurt me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, something weird happened. I was checking my emails at work when I noticed some strange credit card charges, expensive clothes, spa treatments, and hotels I'd never heard of. I immediately called the bank, thinking it was some kind of mistake. But after a quick investigation, they confirmed the transactions were from my card. My brain started racing. It wasn't just some minor financial issue, it was someone trying to steal my money. And to make things worse, I knew who it was, Ashley. But the charges on my credit card were just the beginning. Over the next few days, more and more weird stuff started happening. Important documents about our house and assets were missing, and personal emails with sensitive info were deleted or changed mysteriously. It was like Ashley was slowly erasing my life, and I didn't know what to do about it. The stress was crazy, but I had to stay calm. If I confronted her right away, she might get suspicious, and I still didn't have all the facts. I needed more info, more proof. That's when I had to make a tough call. I had to get into her phone. It was risky, and I wasn't proud of it, but I was in a desperate situation. One night, while she was sleeping, I snuck into our bedroom and quietly grabbed her phone. My hands were shaking as I tried all the possible combinations, hoping to guess the password. After a lot of tries, I finally got it right. It was the anniversary date we had, which ironically didn't mean much anymore. When I opened the phone, I saw something that made my blood boil. There were messages between her and a guy named Greg. They were talking about how they'd been seeing each other behind my back for months. She had been using my money for their secret relationship. What made me angriest wasn't just her cheating, but the depth of the betrayal. I couldn't believe she would do that to me. It hurt like hell. Ashley and Greg were up to something way more sinister than I ever could have imagined. I had no idea that she was planning to leave me and take as much of my money as she could before filing for divorce. Turns out, she had been transferring assets into her own name without telling me. Greg was helping her every step of the way, and even said that after the divorce, they'd be together and she'd never have to worry about money again. When I saw the messages, I couldn't even breathe. The woman I trusted with everything had not only cheated on me with another guy, but she'd planned to ruin me financially. It was like she was using me as a pawn in some game. The worst part wasn't just the messages. There were photos of her and Greg together in hotels she booked with my card. Every picture felt like a knife in my heart. I couldn't keep reading. I put the phone down and stumbled out of the room, my head spinning. How did this happen? How didn't I see it coming? For hours, I just sat in the living room, trying to figure it all out. I wanted to confront her, yell at her, but I knew that wouldn't help. She'd just lie, twist things around like she always does. I needed to think clear about this. I had to stay one step ahead of her. The next morning, I made a decision. I quietly called a lawyer and explained what happened. I showed her screenshots of texts, financial stuff, anything I could find that would prove my case. Claire, the lawyer, she's a smart lady. She understood right away how serious this was. She told me to move fast before Ashley did more damage. We're going to freeze her accounts first, Claire said, sounding pretty firm. That'll stop her from moving any more money around. Then we'll build a case for financial fraud and cheating. You left some pretty big clues, Ryan. We just need to collect them and use them. For the first time in a while, I felt like there might be a glimmer of hope. Claire was trying to reassure me that even though Ashley's scheme was ruthless, she'd been pretty careless, leaving a lot of evidence behind. If we moved fast, we might be able to salvage what was left of my finances. But the legal battle was just half the problem emotionally. I felt totally crushed because the person I'd loved and shared everything with had turned into my biggest enemy. And the worst part, she didn't even know I knew. For the next few days, I tried to act like everything was normal. I was playing the part of the unaware husband, going about my daily business like nothing had changed. Ashley was still putting on a show, pretending everything was fine, even though she was planning my downfall in secret. But now I had the advantage. I froze her accounts, protected my financial assets, and started the legal process to defend myself. I wasn't letting her get away with what she did, not after everything she put me through. The final confrontation was coming, and this time, I was ready. As the days went by, I waited for the next move from Ashley. I knew there was going to be a confrontation, but now it seemed like the surprise was on my side. Every morning, I watched her go about her day, smiling like everything was normal, while I knew she was plotting behind my back. The tension at home was unbearable, but I didn't want her to know I was onto her. I had to stay patient and calm, because soon things were going to change. I kept working with Claire, gathering as much evidence as I could, always one step ahead of Ashley's plans. The more we uncovered, the more clear it became that her betrayal wasn't just about leaving me. It was about destroying me completely, taking everything we'd worked for and starting a new life with Greg, free from financial responsibilities. It was Tuesday night, and things were finally coming to a head. I just got home from work, and Ashley was in the kitchen cooking dinner. She greeted me with a forced smile and asked how my day was. It was weird, knowing there was a whole web of lies and deceit behind that smile. Good, I said, trying to keep it casual. Busy, but good. How about you? Just the usual, she replied lightly. Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about our future. I think we should have a serious talk about where we're going. There it was, the moment she'd been waiting for. I could see it in her eyes, the start of her final push. She thought she had me cornered, thought she knew what I was thinking, but she had no idea I'd been planning this conversation for weeks. I agreed, trying to stay calm. We should talk. Ashley's smile wavered for a second, but then she quickly recovered. I've been giving this a lot of thought, she started, her voice careful. It seems clear to me that we're not on the same page emotionally. I mean, we've both changed, right? I nodded, urging her to continue. And well, I think it would be better for both of us to go our separate ways, she said, finally voicing a decision she'd been considering for a while. She'd already talked to a lawyer and filed for a divorce. Her words hung in the air, like a ticking bomb. Ashley played it cool, pretending to be logical, like the decision was mutual and not something she'd planned for months. I saw the satisfaction in her eyes, the belief that she held the upper hand. But I stayed calm. I understand, I said. It's been a tough time for both of us. But before we go our separate ways, there's something I need to say. Her eyes narrowed a bit, but she didn't say anything. I pulled some papers out of my pocket and laid them on the counter between us. She looked at them with a confused expression. What are these? She asked in a shaking voice. Everything, Ashley, I replied. Bank statements, credit card records, legal documents. Everything you've been hiding from me. Her face went pale, as she stared at the papers. For a second, she couldn't even speak. I know about all the money you've transferred. I know about the hotels and shopping sprees, everything you did with Greg, I continued. And I know you were planning to steal everything I have. Ryan, I'm sorry, Ashley. I cut her off, but you've been lying and cheating on me for months. I thought we could talk about it, but after what I found out, there's no other way. Your hands were shaking as you reached for the papers, flipping through them in shock. You opened and closed your mouth, but nothing came out. You looked completely surprised by what I found. How did you started, but I cut you off again. You really thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? You thought I'd just let you take everything? Your eyes filled with fear and anger, like a trapped animal's. I didn't mean for this to happen, Ryan. I didn't want things to get this far. It was just... I didn't plan it, but I knew better. You planned it. You and Greg conspired to steal everything I worked for. Don't act like a victim now. Teary-eyed, she tried to reach out to me, but I wasn't moved. After all the manipulation, I knew it was just another performance. Ryan, please. We can still work it out, she begged, her voice shaking. I don't want to lose it all. I shook my head, a strange calmness washing over me. Too late for that, Ash. I talked to my lawyer. Accounts are frozen, assets protected. You won't get a penny more from me. Her face twisted in rage, the mask of regret falling in an instant. Bastard, she hissed. You think you're so clever, huh? You think you won? You don't know what Greg and Again, I interrupted her. Greg's out of the picture, Ash. Talked to his wife. She stared at me in shock, looking genuinely scared for the first time. What? I leaned in, whispering softly. Guess what? You weren't the only person with secrets. Turns out Greg's wife is filing for a divorce, and she's after everything she can get from him. Do you really think he'll stick around when she has him by the throat? Ashley's mouth dropped open, but she couldn't say anything. She looked absolutely devastated as her well-planned scheme fell apart right before her eyes. You're done, Ash, I said calmly, standing up and heading for the door. This is over. As I walked out of the house, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally done. All the lies, deceit, and betrayal were in the past. I'd won. But even though I'd escaped Ashley's trap, it would still take me a long time to recover from the emotional damage. The person I thought I knew no longer existed. They'd been replaced by someone else. I survived their betrayal, but it changed me forever. The house was eerily quiet after I walked out. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the constant tension, was finally lifting off my shoulders. But as freeing as it felt to have the upper hand, I knew the aftermath of this disaster wasn't something I could escape overnight. Ashley had stayed behind, her world crumbling as she faced the reality of what she'd done. I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. As much as I wanted to be rid of her, a part of me still mourned the life we'd had before everything went wrong. She was no longer the woman I had fallen in love with, and I had to accept that the person I thought I knew had never really existed. That was the hardest part. The divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to the mountain of evidence I had provided. My lawyer, Claire, was relentless, ensuring that Ashley didn't get a cent more than she was entitled to. Her attempts to claim more of our assets fell flat in court, especially after the discovery of her financial fraud and infidelity. The judge saw right through her manipulations, and I was able to walk away with the majority of what we had built together. Ashley's reaction during the hearings was cold, but there was an undercurrent of desperation in her eyes. Greg, as I had predicted, had abandoned her the moment his wife filed for divorce. He was in no position to help her, financially or otherwise. She had lost everything, the money, her new life with Greg, and any hope of starting over with the upper hand. Her attempts to plead with the court were hollow and without merit. She had played her cards and she had lost. As for me, the legal victory was bittersweet. I had won in the sense that I hadn't let her destroy me, but emotionally, I still had a long road ahead. The hurt didn't vanish the moment the papers were signed. The betrayal lingered, gnawing at me in moments of silence. I had trusted her completely, and she had shattered that trust in the cruelest way possible. Moving on wasn't going to be easy. After the divorce was finalized, I sold the house. It had too many memories, too much baggage. Every room reminded me of what we had once shared, and of how quickly it had all fallen apart. I needed a fresh start, a new beginning away from the ghost of our broken marriage. With the sale of the house and my portion of the assets secured, I moved into a small apartment across town, a place where I could rebuild my life on my terms. The first few weeks were lonely. Even though I knew leaving Ashley was the right decision, there was still a sense of loss. I had spent years of my life with her, building something that I thought was real, only to watch it disintegrate in front of me. It was a strange mix of relief and grief, like closing a chapter of a book you had loved, but realizing the story wasn't what you thought it was. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to find my footing again. Therapy helped me process the emotional fallout. I learned that Ashley's betrayal didn't define me. It was a reflection of her, not of my worth or my ability to be loved. That was a hard lesson to learn, but it was necessary. I had spent so long blaming myself for the collapse of our marriage, for my sexuality, for not being able to make her happy, that I had forgotten that a relationship is a two-way street. Her cruelty, her deception, wasn't my fault. I also began to explore the side of myself that I had buried for so long. My coming out as gay had been the catalyst for Ashley's spiral, but it had also been the first time I had truly been honest with myself. As painful as everything had been, it was liberating to finally accept who I was. I had been hiding for so long, afraid of what it would mean to live authentically. But now I knew that pretending wasn't the answer. I deserved to be happy, to be loved for who I really was, not for the person I had pretended to be. Slowly, I started to meet people in the LGBTQ+ community. I made new friends, people who understood the struggles I had faced, people who had gone through their own battles with identity and acceptance. It was refreshing to be in a space where I didn't have to hide, where I could be open about my experiences without fear of judgment. It was a community I had needed for so long, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged. As I built new connections and embraced this new chapter of my life, I began to heal. The wounds Ashley had left were still there, but they were no longer bleeding. I realized that I wasn't broken. I was just starting over. And starting over didn't have to be a bad thing. It was a chance to rebuild, to create a life that was truly mine, without the weight of someone else's expectations or lies. One day, months after the divorce had been finalized, I received a text from Ashley. It was short, just a few sentences, but it caught me off guard. "I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her how much pain she had caused, to make her understand the depth of her betrayal. But another part of me knew that no words could change what had happened. There was no going back, no undoing the damage. In the end, I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her apology, while long overdue, didn't change anything. I had already moved on, and there was no place for her in my future. She was a part of my past now, and that's where she would stay. As I stood by the window of my new apartment, looking out over the city, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and I had survived. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future might hold. If you like such stories, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. It will be the biggest support for me.